Well, good morning, everyone. Hope you're well. And when we started doing these thoughts for the day, when we restarted doing them, I said that I would occasionally tell stories of God incidents in my life, and hopefully, as I said before, as a means to glorify God and not me. And I think there's a fine line to be had in that respect, and hope I managed to achieve it in what I say today. Now, yesterday, Tom told us of how a knock on the door changed his day and lifted his mood. That was a God incident, wasn't it? And if we look at our daily lives and reflect upon them, and we will see those God incidents, however big or small. And we all see the world in different ways, don't we? And we all encounter God in different ways. Sometimes it's in the majesty of creation, just the beauty of creation. Sometimes it's in connection with someone that we never expected. And sometimes it might be what we call coincidence. But our spiritual eyes must be open in order to discern them, however big or small they are. You know, sometimes the search for God and God incidents is a bit like trying to demist a car window on a cold day. You want it to happen quickly, but it takes a long time to see anything clearly. We do need to develop a purposefulness in seeking and seeing these incidents and God at work, and our discernment will grow, and that will in turn lead us to live in thankfulness more each day. And the story I wanted to tell you happened a few years ago. Now, I had become addicted to a prescribed medication, a benzodiazepine called lorazepam, which is a very, very strong tranquilizer. Now, I hadn't realised that I was addicted until I tried to withdraw from it, and I had severe withdrawal symptoms, effectively going into cold turkey, which caused me to be admitted to hospital on 2 or 3 occasions for suspected heart attack, and I had seizures and all sorts of physical problems, as well as an incredible anxiety within me. And this was before I had understood the nature of withdrawal from this particular drug. I hadn't realised also that I'd been on the maximum dose of the drug for 10 years. Now, at this time, or just after I'd tried to withdraw, there was a series of television documentaries about the effects of the drug, and also there was a lot in the newspapers about it, and there was a national outcry. And it was only then that I realised what had been happening to me, because none of the medics knew what was happening to me. They didn't recognise what the physical manifestations of the withdrawal were occurring within me. And once that I realised what was happening to me, I sought out the correct medical support to withdraw safely and effectively, which meant going back onto the maximum dose and very slowly lessening the dosage. Sometimes just shaving off a minuscule amount of one tablet. And it took 15 months to eventually come off it. And then for the last part I had to go on to Valium and then down to nothing, which was a huge relief to me and those around me. And it had been a pretty traumatic time, particularly in the early days of withdrawal, which, that, you know, as I say, saw a huge increase in anxiety and massive physical effects. And someone told me, one of the medics told me, one of the experts said it was more difficult to come off this drug than it was to come off heroin. Now, let me get to the point of the story, because that's not the point of the story, that's the backstory. I worked as a social worker at the time, And about a week after the final withdrawal, I was in my office and my phone rang. Now, the phone system in the office meant that all calls went through the main switchboard, and then the switchboard operator would transfer the call to whoever the call was for. I picked the phone up, and it was obviously not the switchboard operator, but someone who had somehow got straight through to my extension. It was a woman who was clearly in distress, finding it difficult to breathe, and she was just saying, "Please help me, please help me, I don't know what to do." And it was difficult for her to explain, but after a time she calmed down enough to tell me what she said amazed me. She told me that she'd been on lorazepam for 12 years, and that when she'd gone at the beginning of the week to get a repeat prescription from her GP had refused to prescribe the drug anymore. And he explained that the NHS had sent out advisory notices telling GPs not to prescribe the drug anymore. She told me that she couldn't take what was happening. And she'd been in this state for 5 days, and it was getting worse and worse, and she was considering suicide. She didn't want to feel like this anymore. She lived on her own, and she had no family nearby. And of course her situation mirrored mine. And her doctor's response clearly showed that he didn't have an understanding of what this sudden withdrawal would do to her. And after I spoke with her, I promised to contact the GP and then go round to visit her. And I rang the GP. He was none too pleased about me telling him how to do his job. And he asked me what medical training I had that gave me the right to talk to him in the way that I was. Now, because of my own experience and all the research that I'd done, I was armed with all the latest information about the drug and the need for slow withdrawal and the number of suicides that had occurred because of inappropriate withdrawal. And I advised him strongly to visit his patient and get her back on the drug as soon as possible and make sure that there was support for her to withdraw safely. And he began to realise that I did know what I was talking about and became more willing to accept it. And I think he was fearful of the implications of what he'd done. And he did pick up the seriousness of it all, because he did call round in the next hour and gave the lady a repeat prescription. And I visited just after she had the prescription, and I went to fetch it for her, and she was incredibly relieved. Now, was it a coincidence that the phone call came through to me when all calls would normally go through the switchboard? No, I don't think so. This was God. This was a God incident. I'm quite sure of it. And God intervened in this story in more ways than one, because I developed a relationship with the GP surgery and worked with them and the community psychiatric nurse to offer a personal dimension, both to them and to people who were going through withdrawal, when we developed a support group. You know, and that's really God at work. All of that is God at work. God used my experience, and that connection with the woman was no coincidence, was it? Sometimes we can clearly see God at work in those big dramatic ways, which I think it was. That was quite a dramatic situation. But when we really look, we can see God in the small and the seemingly inconsequential everyday things, like a knock on the door. Well, I'll see you. No, I always keep saying that I'll see you. I'll speak to you next Monday. And in the meantime, you take care of yourselves, and God bless, and keep keep those spiritual ears and eyes open and see God at work.